does diagnosis matter and make a difference as much in marketing as it does in dentistry? And I think by the end you're going to see that, you know, the thought of a patient coming in to your practice and just being handed a one-size-fits-all dental plan is fairly ridiculous, right? You wouldn't just give every patient, this is the exact same treatment, or you wouldn't have them choose from 3 different packages, right? Well, it's just as silly in marketing to do the same thing. The better we can diagnose your marketing needs, the more likely it is you'll actually achieve your growth goals. So that's what we're going to talk about today, because the reality is you're all starting from different points. If I were to come up with a brilliant marketing plan and give it to all your practices, would you all get the same results? Of course not. Right? You'd have different things happening. There's different circumstances you're in, different needs from the beginning. And that's what we're going to figure out today is how do we do those diagnoses. And in a few minutes too, keep your cell phones handy. We're actually going to run, I'm going to have you go to a website and you're going to run the diagnosis on your practice as we talk about it so you can see how these things affect you specifically. Okay? Kind of set the stage for that though. Let me give you some background and let's talk about basically why diagnosis matters so much and where we need to do it within a practice marketing process. Obviously this circle that says practice in it represents your practice. Your practice is one of 3 places where you can essentially increase your revenue, build your patient base, and increase your profitability. Right? And that's really, I can't imagine there's many of you that don't want to at least increase your profitability, but you probably wouldn't be in a marketing seminar unless you weren't looking to figure out how to really grow your practice in general. And the other 2 places besides your practice is your community. You can reach out to the physical community, whether that's through billboards or advertising or whatever, and online. People can find you online. Right? These are the 3 primary areas. And really, to turn that into marketing terms, we're talking about your internal marketing, your push strategy, and your online presence. Right? Those are the 3 primary areas where you're going to drive in patients. Now, the thing about your internal push and online is one is very active. This is you pushing your message out to others in the community. Right? You have to send out a direct mail or place a movie theater ad or put an ad in a newspaper or magazine. Right? You push that message out to them. Online is more passive. People are searching out services or businesses and they're going to find you. Right? So it's a different marketing process. Now, both of these involve your website though. Your website is probably your most critical marketing tool, because whether you're doing your push marketing or your online marketing, they generally filter through the website, with the end goal of everything is to produce the phone call to book an appointment, right? Sometimes your push strategy will go directly to a phone call, get a postcard in the mail, someone might take advantage of the offer, but oftentimes they'll go through the website and the website should generate phone calls for you. That's its primary purpose. So that's how that looks. Now let's complicate this a little bit. Your internal systems, really there's 6 of them, okay? We talked about phone calls. Well, call conversion is a critical internal system. You've got ancillary sales, meaning selling a lot of the services that you offer that patients normally don't think about. And your ancillary services are things like custom mouth guards, or if you do Botox, a lot of those services you offer that your patients generally don't think about. There's your case acceptance and your in-house plan. There's also your referrals and reactivation, your patient referrals and patient reactivation. Okay, those are your internal systems. Push strategy, I've mentioned a few of these already, but those are things like direct mail, magazines, newspapers, billboards, busboards, TV, radio, events, etc. Right? And then online marketing, that is your search engine optimization, your reputation management or your online reviews. It's your social media and your SEM, which stands for search engine marketing. That's things like PayPerClick or Google AdWords, display ads or retargeting ads, things like that. And that's also part of a push strategy, but it helps your online. That's why it connects those 2 things. Then the final piece to this puzzle is your brand foundation. Your brand foundation is actually connected to all of this. It's how you tell your story. It's how you communicate the perceptions of your practice to the outside world. That includes things also like your marketing plan, your messaging, and even your budget, right, are part of that foundation that helps all of this work properly. Kind of a complicated infographic, but does that make sense how those things are connected? So if we take a look at that, take each one of those 4 major objectives, and these are really the 4 strategy objectives of marketing for any dental practice or for really any business. And all of you need to master each of these 4 things. You all need to achieve these in your practice. The levels at which you need to achieve them individually are a little different, but all of these things need to happen. I mean, you can imagine you have to be able to tell a good story. That's going to help your practice. If your internal marketing isn't working, that's going to hurt you. If you don't have a good online presence, people can't find you. And if you're not developing a good push strategy, then people aren't going to remember you. In fact, the primary purpose of a brand is to tell a powerful story, something that helps people relate to you and have feelings and thoughts and emotions towards your business. Your internal marketing, the primary purpose is to build effective systems so that your team is consistently doing the right things in all your internal marketing opportunities. Online is to be found easily and in the right searches, right? And then finally, your push strategy is to build brand equity. Brand equity is how people remember your business. If people don't remember you, they're not going to trust you as much. And so none of your other marketing is going to work. So those are the 4 strategy objectives. So what I want to do now is go through each of these strategy objectives, and let's talk about how you diagnose each one of those. And we're going to start with your brand foundation. And again, that's primarily a messaging and communication process, but it also really deals with the planning and strategic processes as well. So we're going to look at your logo, for example, and your logo needs to be analyzed for how well it reflects your brand and how well it's designed. You know, is it telling the right story? Logos are really critical for that. Next is your website. And again, from a messaging and communication standpoint, how does it do? Visually, is it up to date? Does it communicate your brand well? And is it a marketing savvy website? The reality with most dental websites is that they're actually built more for robots, right? The Google bots, for search engines and things like that. They're not built for humans to take in information on the website and then make decisions based on it. And so we have to make sure that they're also very marketing savvy in how they work. Okay, next is your budget. Most practices, frankly, budget incorrectly. They're not sure how to build marketing budgets and so forth. And so those need to be goals-based budgets. And I will actually go into that more in detail later. And then finally, what is your overall marketing plan? Is there a strategic plan in place, or is there just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks? All right, number 2 is your internal systems. How do you diagnose those? I mentioned there's your 6 systems. They're all right there. There's 4 questions you should ask for each of those systems. Has your team been trained recently? When's the last time your team was trained on how to answer the phones, for example? Or when were they last trained on how to sell your in-house plan? And if you don't have one, I highly recommend you get one. When were they last trained on reactivation or referrals or any of these things? You know, regular training is pretty critical to keeping your skills sharp and learning what's best and new. So the next thing you look at is consistency. You might have some of these internal systems in place, or at least internal processes, but are you consistent in implementing them? The next thing you look at is, are you effective? Okay, maybe you're asking for referrals, but you're not getting very many. Why? And then finally, are you tracking it? Do you track this in a way that allows you to understand if you are consistent and if you are effective? So those 4 questions, if you apply those to each of those areas, it should easily reveal where you need help there. And that's a great diagnosis to do, and that's something you can all just take those 4 questions and go ask yourself for each of those systems. Next is your online marketing. Remember, this is something that's really pushing people to you, people who are ready to buy. And so how do you diagnose that? Well, we know the website's an important part of that. And so before we analyzed your website from a brand foundation standpoint, that was all about communication and marketing and messaging. Well, this is really about programming and structure and content and things like that. Is it set up? Is the metadata, the descriptors, are they all correct in your programming? Is your site structure built to Google standards and your keyword content optimized for what you want to be found for? You know, the services you want to sell and the most important keywords. So you need to look at that. Next, your search engine marketing. We really want to look at your per-click price in your community. As you'll see in a minute, that's really important in determining how you can use that as a tool to grow your practice, or maybe it's not right for you. And also looking at just the competition in your area that's driving those prices. Search engine optimization. That's the process of making your website more easily found online, right? And so how do you assess your SEO needs? Well, you need to look at things like your online citations. Where do you rank in the top keywords? You know, in the most important keywords, do you come up near the top or are you buried in the bottom? And then also, how competitive is your area in terms of competition? Finally, your reputation management. I can't stress how critical good online reviews and reputation is. If you don't have enough reviews, if you don't have quality reviews, or if you're in a really competitive area and you don't have enough compared to your competition, that's going to hurt you. And so we need to check these things, as well as your social media and post analysis, which really plays into actually a lot of these things. That's your online. You got to diagnose all those things. Would you agree that that'd be pretty important to be able to look in all those areas to make sure these things are set up correctly for you? And probably more importantly, to make sure that you're starting from the right place and implementing the right solutions. Okay, the final thing would be your push diagnosis. What do you look at there to determine, well, what types of external marketing are right for you? Well, first of all, check past results. If you've tried any of these things in the past and it worked, it will probably work in the future. One thing to keep in mind in part of the diagnosis, if it didn't work, that might not be because it's a bad way to market. It might be how you implemented the program, and that's important to look at too. You should also look at your demographics. Your demographics are really critical in determining what type of external marketing works. Certain types of marketing work better with certain types of demographics. Then finally, how competitive is your market? You'll notice that's kind of a common thread in a lot of these. Understanding how competitive your market is can really determine what kind of, or should really determine what kind of marketing you do. So, we've just gone through this list of different items that should be diagnosed. And at Ascent, we will diagnose all of these prior to working with any client, okay? The other thing that we'll do is we will diagnose these on an ongoing basis as we work with you to make sure we're getting the most out of it. We don't have time to go through all of these, however, so I'm going to pick out 4. The first one we're going to look at in detail is the budget. How do you set up a proper budget? Number 2 is your search engine optimization. We're going to look at that and how do you diagnose that. Number 3 will be your reviews. And number 4 is your cost per click or your AdWords. Now, after I do the budget, that's where I'm going to have you pull out your phone and we're going to do these together. As I show you examples in my presentation, you're going to be able to look at these for your own practice and draw some conclusions based on those diagnoses. That's one of the reasons I wanted to do these 3, so you could actively participate in this diagnosis process and understand where your practice is at. Okay? First, your budget. How do you set a proper marketing budget? That's probably one of the big mysteries in dental marketing. And the reason it's a mystery is because a lot of the marketing out there, or a lot of the messaging and communication out there, gives you bad information on how to set the budget. It tells you to look at maybe a percentage of your gross revenue. But that generally doesn't work to set an accurate budget to hit growth goals. So how do you do that? There's actually only one way to budget accurately. And as I go through this and you look at it, you can tell me if you agree or disagree with this, that this is the only way to do it. First of all, you have to establish your growth goal. You know, you're only marketing to grow. That's its purpose. Marketing is the engine that drives growth. So if that's the case, well, what is your growth goal? Number one, you know, you might want to go from 700,000, for example, to 800,000. Number two, determine your annual per patient value. That's actually very easy to figure out. Just look at your gross revenue for the last 12 months. Look at how many unique patients you saw over that time period. Divide your gross revenue by the number of unique patients, and that will give you your annual per patient value. Most practices are usually between about $550 to $600 in per patient value. I've seen it as low as $250, and I've seen it as high as like $1,400, $1,500 per patient. Okay? Once you know your per patient value, next thing you need to do is calculate how many patients you're going to need in order to hit your goal. So if you need $100,000 worth of growth, that's your goal, and your patients are worth $500 each, if you divide $100,000 by 500, that will give you the number of patients you need to reach your goal. You can divide that number by 12, and that'll tell you how many patients you need to add per month in addition to what you're already getting in order to hit your goal of $100,000. Okay, so once you understand how many patients you need to figure out how expensive it's going to be to bring them into the practice. Every patient has a per patient acquisition cost. Okay, so as you project your per patient acquisition costs, you're going to get a sense of what it's going to cost to bring that in. You know how many patients you need, and let's say it's going to cost $300 per patient in per patient acquisition costs. Then you simply multiply the new patients needed by your per patient acquisition costs, and that will give you the budget needed to bring those patients in. Now, I get that projecting your per patient acquisition costs can be a little tricky if you're just a dentist, especially if you haven't done any marketing in the past. However, we can help you with that. And I'll show you a little calculator that will help us figure out those per patient acquisition costs so that you can feel more confident that your budget is realistic for the number of patients you need, okay? Here's that calculator. And I'm going to go through this calculator. We're going to start on the left side, work our way down, then we'll move to the right side. And the left side is really about your practice numbers. The right side is about your marketing budget. So starting at the top, let's talk about that practice. That's a $700,000 practice. And they want to get, their goal is $800,000. Well, if they actually achieve that goal, that would be about 12.5% growth, which is a lot of growth for a business to have in 1 year. So that's an ambitious goal. To produce that $700,000, they saw 1,160 active patients. So we divided 700,000 by 1,160, and that gives us their per patient value of $603 each, which is maybe slightly above average. Now, this practice over that same 12 months saw 136 new patients. That's about 11.3 per month. Okay, so they're not getting a ton of new patients. And we can also estimate 15% attrition. That's actually a very good number to use. If you don't know your attrition, you should probably assume it's about 15% and use that to figure out how many patients aren't coming in from the year previous. So with that 15% attrition and then replacing patients at a rate of 11.3 a month, this practice is not replacing patients faster than they're losing them. So they're going to have a little bit of reduction from year to year. We project that if they don't change something, they're going to go from 1160 down to 1122 in terms of patient numbers. We do that because obviously attrition replacement is something we need to factor into how many patients they're going to need to reach their goal, because you can see that their projected production for the next 12 months will be about $677,000, which means they really need not just $100,000 in revenue to reach their goal, but they need about $122,000 in revenue to reach their goal. And if we divide that by their per patient value and divide that by 12 months, that's how we get 17 additional patients will be needed. So they need to be up around 17 plus 11, about 28 patients a month in order to produce that $122,000. Okay, so we've just figured out how many more patients they need. Now, what kind of budget is going to be necessary in order to produce those 17 additional patients? That's the next step. So we put in here a budget of $3,000 per month. If we annualize that out, that's $36,000. So how do we know then what that's going to return? What's the return on investment on a $36,000 investment? Well, we've been working with dentists for a long time, and we're pretty confident in these return ranges. And I'll talk in a minute about why the differences are and why it gets better as the amount goes up. But right now, that $3,000 falls right here and tells us that we can project about a 200 to 400% return on our $36,000 investment. So that means somewhere between about $72,000 to $144,000 in return. If we take an average of that, it's $108,000. At $108,000 divided by $603, which is your per patient value, and then divide that by 12 months, that tells us we're going to bring in about 15 patients a month with that. And our per patient acquisition cost is about $201. Is $201 a good per patient acquisition cost? Yes, actually it is. It's very good. Anything under 300 is good. As you get close to 100 or anything under 200 is just excellent. Now, there is a caveat on that. If your per patient value is a lot higher, this is almost always going to go up too. And so sometimes it's okay to have a much higher per patient acquisition cost if your per patient value is higher, because it's generally harder to bring in higher value patients into a practice. It requires more touch points, more marketing, and so forth. So with that in mind though, 15 patients, is that going to get us where we want to be? Well, pretty close. They needed 17 and we're at 15. So we're really close in that. In fact, this little graph shows you kind of visually what that looks like. So this represents their last 12 months. This is their goal, the darker blue. The black bar represents where we project they're going to be if they don't change anything. The little salmon colored one here, that's kind of the difference between the black and the blue. And then the green is what we project in marketing. Now, in an ideal world, those would line up, and that's how you know you've got a good budget. Those are pretty close. So I would probably advise this client, yeah, it's a pretty good budget. You know, if we end up on the high end, you could surpass that. If we end up on the low end, we're going to be a little short, but that's a realistic budget going into that, okay? This is where it, to me, also gets really good. Is, you know, in a 1 year, basically that's measuring it off a 12-month rate of return, measuring the revenues from the new patients over a 12-month period. What do we get in return? But if we look out further over a 5-year period, how does marketing work? And this is really where it makes a lot of sense too. This dot at the bottom represents our same $36,000 investment, okay, year over year. And of course that can change from year to year depending on your needs, but let's assume it just stays the same. Well, this green dot here represents that $108,000 probable return that we just talked about. And this line represents the attrition from year over year from those same patients. They're going to keep coming in every year, and you're going to return more and more and more from those patients. It'll just add up, right? That you wouldn't, if in theory, if you just stopped marketing, that's still going to happen. Those patients will keep coming in. If you do market in year 2, you're not starting again from the base that you were starting from. You're starting on top of the growth from the previous year, which then moves you up to here in year 2, and your overall growth curve hits that. Year 3, year 4, year 5, because those same things keep happening, even with that ongoing attrition. So that shows you how a 5-year growth curve works, okay? And why marketing is actually a really good investment and being able to hit that growth. So by the end of 5 years, they're at $400,000 worth of growth. So remember that little part of my budget calculator that said as you spend more, you get better results? Why is that true? Let's talk about that for just a few minutes, because I think this is an important concept to understand to go into budgeting with the right mindset. So there's 3 factors I want to look at that your budget's going to determine. And the first one, your budget determines the type of marketing you can employ. So for example, I mentioned, said pay-per-click earlier, or direct mail, or TV, or radio, billboards. All of those things are actually pretty expensive. They require a significant investment. If your budget is too small, you simply take the list of all the possibilities of marketing and you start crossing things off you can't afford. So the reason that's important too is because in many cases, and in fact I'd say in most cases, those types of marketing are the best ways to produce patients. And I'll talk about that more later, but it's, oftentimes I'll see dentists where their budgets are so small they can't do any marketing that's actually going to be effective. So they're just kind of putting stuff out there and hoping something sticks. Number 2 is the reach of your marketing. This one's pretty obvious. The bigger your budget, the more people you're going to reach through your marketing. The more people you reach through your marketing, the more likely it is you'll get responses, okay? And then finally, frequency, probably the most important. The more often you get your message in front of the same person, the more likely it is they'll take action. In fact, the rule of thumb is, in terms of quality patients, we define a quality patient as a patient who values dentistry, wants dentistry part of their lives. Those type of patients, it takes about 5 to 6 touches before they take action. So it's really not enough that you send out something once and just hope that works. You've got to get your message in front of people over and over and over, and that's what builds that brand equity I talked about earlier, which is the purpose of, a lot of the purpose of your push strategy, right? To help people remember your brand. We tend to trust things and brands and products and services that we remember. All right, so because of those 3 things, this is true. As your budget gets better, you're just going to get better rates of return on your marketing. In fact, if we do budgets less than $1,500, it just keeps going down. And a lot of dentists will get frustrated because they'll have their marketing, and I get $1,000 is a lot of money, but it's generally not enough to really move the needle. I always give the example, let's say you spend $1,000 a month and that's $12,000. And let's say you double your return on investment, you get a 200% return, which you probably won't, honestly. But let's say you do, that's still only a $24,000 difference to your practice, and $12,000 of that went into marketing. And so it's not going to move the needle a lot. And if you have your attrition on top of that, a lot of times you don't feel that marketing. Okay, so budgets matter. They matter a lot. Let's move on to example number 2. How do you diagnose your SEO? Now, before I get into the specifics on that, I want to set some parameters and make sure that as I use different vocabulary and so forth, we're all on the same page as to what I'm talking about. And I want to first dissect this page, okay? This is just a general search page from Google. I did dentist Las Vegas, and this is what it brought up. Now, this top part up here, up above the map, it's going to display an ad or 2. There's always going to be 1 or 2 ads there, not always, but usually. And that's your paid advertising. Okay? And then when I talk about pay-per-click in a little bit, that's what this refers to. This middle section is your local search. Okay, this is where most people, the vast majority of people, are going to actually find your business and contact your business. And we're talking people searching for a local business. The local search is where people find you. This is the organic search down here. Always appears below the map. It's really critical in determining where you place here, but most people aren't going to find you in this section. Most people are going to click on this more places, which will take them to this screen, and you've probably all seen that. Right? You'll notice again, there's 2 ads at the top of this. This dentist, Absolute Dental, has the number 1 rank, and then it moves down through the ranking right there. Okay, so with that in mind, how do you know where you rank in each of these areas? Now, I mentioned here, if everyone could get out your smartphone and go to insight.ascentpgs.com. Does everybody see that input form there? Go ahead and fill that out. There's only 4 things you need to put in. Just put your name or the doctor's name if you're not the doctor. Put in your email address, the name of your practice, and your zip code. So those 4 things. And what it's going to do, then just hit submit. It's going to verify that it found your correct address. If it's your correct address, click the little box by it and then hit next, and then it will go out and do some diagnosis, and in a moment it will return some results. So with that, let's kind of walk through those. So now look at your results, and it's going to show you up in the right hand corner of that first screen something like this. It will have the keywords, the top keywords for your area, and then it will show you where your practice ranks on that local map for those keywords. Now if you scroll down a little bit, you will see your average rank for those keywords. This practice happens to be 19, and where you rank overall compared to your competitors. If you're first, you're going to be at the top of that. If you're lower than fifth, you're going to be at the bottom of that. If you're somewhere in between, you'll be in between, right? And you can see who's your top competitor. So in this case, River City Dental comes up, their average rank is 19th. Their overall rank compared to their competitors is 21st. Riverton Heights Dental Care is number 1 in both. And that's really good. They're doing awesome. And they got these other dentists who are also doing really well. Right? So you'll also notice on your little graph, let's talk about what that means. The orange dot represents you. The green dot represents the top dentist, where you'd like to be, and if that's not you. And there's about 40 other dentists on this. Each dot represents a dentist. Now, the key in search engine optimization is to try to move you up that chain. All right? Now, let's talk about what these different tiers represent. The different tiers are levels of search engine optimization implementation that need to be performed in order to move up that chain, okay? You'll notice it only has tier 2, 3, and 4 here. Tier 1 exists, but it's these dentists that you can't even see. They're not even on the chart. This is a super competitive area. You can see on yours, it'll have a little box that says how many competitors. If it's 60 plus, it means there's at least 60. If there's fewer than that, then there's fewer than that. But in any case, this doctor's in a tier 3, and if they want to get to tier 4 up in this area here, they're going to have to increase their level of search engine optimization. I'll talk to you about what that means specifically in a moment. So as you look at your practice and kind of see where you fall on that and what tier, you can see if you need to increase what you're doing in order to improve and what tier that would need to push you into. Okay? All right, so with that, why does Google, let's kind of back up just a little bit for a second and just talk about why does Google rank one practice over another? Why is this doctor here and River City Dental is right here? And what about all these doctors in between? Well, there's actually, it's both complex and simple. And we want to look at it from a simple perspective for a second. There's 3 primary factors that are going to determine why your dot is where it's at on that graph. 1, your content. Whatever I search for, I want that site to come up and give me the content I'm searching for. So how well your content matches the search query matters. Number 2, popularity. I think a better way to say that is traffic. The more traffic you get to your site, the better that looks to Google. Google likes the more popular sites. People like to find the more popular sites. Therefore, Google likes to promote the more popular sites. And then finally, the last one is your reputation. Your reputation is actually made up of a lot of stuff online. It's basically everything that deals with you online. But honestly, the best way to control that is through your reviews online. How many reviews you have matter. The quality of those reviews in terms of your average ranking matter. Okay? So that's those are the things that are going to determine. But the thing you have to remember, you can have good content, good traffic, great reputation, but if your competition's is better, you're still not going to be above them. So those dots above you, on average, are simply doing better in these areas than you are. And until you can figure out ways to outperform them in those areas, you're not going to pass them. In fact, if you're kind of just static, it's likely someone will eventually pass you and you'll start to move the wrong way down that ladder. Okay? So I talked about those tiers earlier, right? Those boxes that represented the different tiers of search engine optimization. Let's talk about how do you move from tier 1 to tier 4? What's the difference of implementing tier 1 to tier 4? Now, again, most search engine optimization companies don't call them tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. What you do is you simply purchase a search engine optimization package that's usually included with your website that includes some sort of monthly whatever. You can get the more robust one, the gold package, the whatever, platinum, okay? You buy that and they're implementing things. And essentially the level of involvement they have in monthly optimization is going to determine ultimately what tier they're implementing. And what that means is they're going to be focusing, so the cheaper your optimization, the less they focus on building content for those important keywords. The more expensive your optimization, most likely, the more they're putting into that. So that's true with all these things. Links, building links into your site from other sources is really critical. Okay? And that's a process that can take a lot of time. Same thing with citations. Those are business listings. You've got probably hundreds of business listings out there, from everything from ZocDoc to 1-800-Dentist to Google to Yahoo, whatever, Yelp. All these places have you listed in their directories. And how well those citations or business listings are kept up to date and are the same across the board is really important. And obviously that can be a lot of work to update those, and so that increases as your SEO increases. Your metadata, I talked briefly about that. You know, how your site, the keywords that are put into your site programming and descriptions are really important and need to be updated. Your site structure, how it's built, may need to be changed and updated. And then finally, the programming of the site itself. To reiterate, the cheaper your SEO, the less of this stuff they're doing. Okay? When you purchase search engine optimization, kind of thinking back to those boxes, you're essentially capping how far up the chain you can move based on the level of optimization you purchase. Now, if you're in a more rural area, if you've come from afar or whatever, because I know this area is competitive, but if you're in a more rural area, then maybe that's fine. You don't need much optimization. There's not a lot of competition. However, the more highly competitive an area gets, the higher the level of optimization you need ongoing. And so if you've reached your cap, what do? Well, you have to start doing more optimization through these areas. The thing you have to understand as well is if an area gets super competitive, which we see in most urban areas, optimization, search engine optimization, is only going to get you so far. There has to be supplemental processes to aid the optimization in order to continue to move you up the rankings. If I go back and we look at this, you know, by the time you're getting up into this area, your competition might be doing some serious stuff online. And your optimization could only get you to maybe the beginning of that tier. In order to really keep moving, what do you do next when optimization kind of runs out of its abilities? What else assists search engine optimization? What else can you do to help that if you've reached kind of that plateau on what optimization can do? First of all, Google reviews. And that's what we're going to talk about next. And if any of you have scrolled down on your phone, you probably know that that's coming up anyway. But those are really critical. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Next thing is pay-per-click. You have to drive traffic to your website. And one of the best ways to do that, if not the most consistent way to do that, is just to pay for people to get there. You put your ads up there, people click on them, that's traffic that Google recognizes, either linked from a landing page or better yet, built into a landing page on your website. Social media. Social media is not just, I mean, it's good for building relationships with patients and even potential patients and advertising and so forth, but it's excellent at driving links back to your website, and if you're active on social media, that's going to help that whole process. Push campaigns to drive traffic. I mentioned push strategy earlier. If you start doing movie theater advertising or running ads wherever that drive people to your website, that's going to increase the traffic. That's going to help. And then finally is citation and review engagement. Keep in mind that many of these business listings can be updated, right? You can update your images on your Google business listing, or you can update hours or whatever the case may be. And review engagement. You should be responding to all your reviews, positive and negative. As Google sees all these things happen, that's going to help the SEO. And if you want to continue to pass people, how you engage with these may be necessary for you. And again, if you're lucky enough to live in an area with low competition, these don't matter as much for that purpose. So the next thing we're going to talk about are reviews. So if you scroll down to your review section, you're going to see these two little charts. The first one will tell you how many reviews you have, your total number of reviews in the red on the right, and then the average in the lighter red there on the left. So this particular practice has 21 total reviews. Their average star rating is 4.6. And you can compare that with the top dentists in your area. The top 3 have a lot, and then it kind of drops off. And River City Dental here is number 4 overall. But that, Riverton Heights Dental Care doing really well with 320. I love that Riverton Dental has 145 star reviews. That's really good. And you can see on this chart here, it has an average line going each way. One says where the average is in terms of your rating, and the other one, the vertical line, is the average for number of reviews. You got kind of these 3 outliers that have a ton of reviews and then a bunch of dentists back here. And we have your top 20 competitors in reviews. Each of those dots represents one of your competitors, and you can see where you're at. And really, if you're not up in the upper right quadrant, you're not where you want to be. And obviously, you want to move as far up to the right as you can. There's 2 really bad places to be. One is low reviews with very few, and maybe even worse is low reviews with a ton of them. If you're getting a ton of bad reviews, that's probably a bigger issue, but that rarely happens. Most of the time, if you're not actively pushing reviews, the only people that are leaving them are probably your unhappy customers. And so actively pushing reviews usually leads to a lot of good reviews. Okay? So again, this should help you see very quickly if you need to increase your focus. And what we do too is we really focus on implementing Google-specific review generation. At Ascent, when we generate reviews, it really drives in Google reviews. You might be thinking, well, I've got a review generation service, but chances are, if you're not doing well, it's because they're sending all the reviews to their own server rather than to Google, which is what most of them do. So ours focuses on direct to Google reviews, which are vastly more important than anywhere else you can put them. Let's go to example number 4, cost per click. Go ahead and scroll down to the bottom section, number 3. On yours, it's example number 4 up here. And let's first, before you probably looked at your number there, but let's talk about how it works first. How do if you're going to do pay-per-click, which can be a great way to market a practice, how does that work? First of all, you have to set aside an ad spend. Your ad spend or your monthly budget is what you're going to pay directly to Google. So if you go to Ascent to use our PayPerClick Management services, your ad spend to just pass through us goes right to Google. Right? We charge you for managing it. They charge you for running the ads. Next, every time someone clicks on your ad, if you remember those Google pages I displayed and had the ads up top, anytime someone clicks on those ads, so if you want to go to one of your competitors and just click, 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 you can start debiting their account. It's a very vindictive thing to do. But it basically debits your account, the amount, whatever that click costs. Now, in fact, everyone in here is in different areas, so as you pull that up, I guarantee you some of you have amounts that are different than others that you can see on your cost per click. Why are they different? Well, it's based on how competitive an area is. I've talked about this over and over. The competition in marketing is really critical. And so if just one or two dentists are buying ad space in a community, and again, if you're in a rural community, your cost per click is going to be really low. However, if multiple dentists are purchasing in a specific area, it starts driving up the per click price, and you're essentially bidding on those clicks. So that the competition is going to determine how much is debited. All right? And you can look at your cost per click there and you think, okay, if it says $8.52, that's how much is going to be debited every time someone clicks on your ad, whatever that amount is. Now, I will say the amounts we have in here are estimates based on averages we're seeing, but it's changing all the time. And we estimate conservatively. Your cost per click is probably slightly lower than what you're seeing on there, but at the same time, it gives you a really good ballpark idea of where that's going to be, okay? Because those literally are changing moment by moment. It's impossible to give you an exact number, but these will give you that ballpark range of where your practice is in terms of competitive. And essentially, if you're seeing a per-click price on yours that is less than $5, you're in a really not competitive area. If it's between $5 to $9, that's a medium competitive area, and over $9 and up, I've seen them as high as like $16 a click. That's a high competitive area. Okay, so if you're fortunate enough to live in a lower competitive area, that's great. Conversion, bringing patients into your practice. And I mentioned earlier that pay-per-click can be a good way just to simply get those clicks and that traffic to your website. And that's true. In small budgets, even a few clicks here and there can help your online presence and help people find you online. However, if you're really using this as a conversion tool, meaning you want to bring patients into your practice, then it becomes this numbers game. You have to understand how to go through the numbers, how to read the numbers, how to set up adequate budgets, how to control those budgets. And so let's talk a little bit about that. For example, 100 clicks, we have found that you get about a 13 to 15% click-to-call ratio. Okay, 13 to 15% of the people that visit your landing page are going to actually make that phone call. So at 100 clicks, you're going to get about 13 to 15 calls, in other words. Now, 100 phone calls will deliver about 15 to 20 patients. So again, you get about a 15 to 20% rate of return on calls that come into your practice. So expect that some of those calls are going to be garbage. That means, 80, 85% of those calls aren't going to be good, but 15 to 20 are. And if you know how to handle them properly, you can really decipher which ones. And we've had a lot of clients that will get up to 30% or more in that area. And that's where a well-trained staff is going to be good for that, okay? And then finally, if you kind of run that out, so 1,000 clicks is going to deliver between 19 to 30 patients at those ratios. 19 on the low end, 30 on the high end. So let's put this into real terms. Let's say you set a goal that we would like to bring in 10 new patients a month. Well, what is that going to take in terms of actual cost, how many clicks you're going to need, and so forth? 10 patients is going to require between 334 on the low end and 512 clicks. So if you're converting at a high rate, both on your landing page, getting more calls pushed through, and you're converting at a higher rate in answering those calls and getting the patients in, it might only take 334 clicks to hit your 10 patient goal. If you're converting at a lower rate, your landing page isn't working real well, or you're not converting when those calls come in, then it could take 512 clicks. And obviously, these are averages, and it could be a little more, a little less, but that's generally where most people fall, right? So if, let's say, your cost per click, you can look at yours, you can grab your calculators and do the math on this, and actually, as you'll see in a second, it's already done for you on there. At $5.22 a click, that means you're going to be spending between $1,745 and $2,675 on a budget, a monthly budget, to hit that 10-patient goal. So a way to look at that then, you've got your keywords that have come up, you've got your current cost per click, and what this shows you, it's taking the top one, whatever's on top, and it's showing you those two ranges. The red is if you're inefficient in your landing page, you're inefficient in your calls, you're getting those lower numbers. That's how much you're going to have to spend in order to hit these patient goals. You want 10 patients to come in, it's going to be about $2,700. The green is if you're efficient with your marketing. You want 10 patients to come in, it's going to be about $1,600. Okay, so you can look at that, look at how many patients are there you want, and determine, well, how much is it going to cost? Those of you in a competitive area are thinking, well, that's a lot of money right now. How do you determine if it's worth it? Well, essentially, if you know your per patient value, you can say, okay, 10 patients, and my patients are worth $600 each, that's $6,000 I'm going to get. If I have to spend $6,000 to get those patients, is that worth it? Well, if you're patient, it probably still is, because most of them are going to keep coming in year over year, but in that first year, you might even lose a little on it. So that's where you have to play that out and say, okay, well, maybe this isn't the way to market for me. You don't necessarily do it if it's not something that fits or the numbers don't add up properly for you. You don't do it. Okay? And we can help walk you through that and talk about what works and doesn't work there. The other thing to remember too is maybe you lower your budget, focus on fewer patients, and just focus on assisting your SEO drive you up in the rankings. Because even if you're getting fewer clicks, maybe you're only getting 100 clicks a month, that's still clicks that Google recognizes and going to help you and assist your SEO processes. Okay? All right. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully looking at your own numbers helped you understand where you sit and what it's going to take to improve your online presence. I've touched on these. I want to just dive into a little bit these three factors that are going to determine your conversion rate. I mentioned your landing page. I mentioned the phone calls. One thing I didn't talk about yet were your keywords. Obviously, different keywords, you can even see it on your page there, have different prices. And understanding which keywords are going to be the most benefit to your practice, drive the best results, maybe a little cheaper keywords here and there. Those keywords can help the process of getting the most bang for your buck. I mentioned already the quality of your landing page. This is why you pay for, these reasons are why you pay for a company to help you with this. Because the quality of your landing page is really important in terms of getting people to take action. And also the quality of your landing page helps Google determine the cost per click for you specifically. The better it's built, the better its message, the better the keywords, they actually reduce your price a little bit because it's easier for them. And finally, your phone skills. Right? So when we work with a client, we're going to train you on how to answer those phone calls. We're going to actually listen to your phone calls, see how you're doing, and then retrain you and really help you get the most out of those opportunities that come in so that you can convert at the higher rate. Because the higher your conversion, the better your landing page, the better your keywords. In the end, you might even be getting a better than that green, and you can have a lower monthly budget, but still generate outstanding results, hit your goals. One last thing that I want to talk about on just management. This chart shows over a 12-month period how much dentists in a community were spending, what their budgets were for pay-per-click. And you'll notice that at this point, you had a lot of high budgets. And this practice stopped doing it, and then these kind of dropped down, and the budgets were lower here. Well, keyword pricing was probably a lot higher here than it was at the end here. And if you're spending either not enough here or too much here, you could be wasting money either way. You can't just set, in fact, again, most of these prepackaged pay-per-click deals, just you set an amount and just run it. We've talked to dentists all the time that have been running that same amount and same spend, ad spend, month over month over month over month. And you really can't do that. You need someone to help manage that and make sure that your ad spend is adequate to hit your goals. Otherwise, again, you could just be throwing money away. If you're not paying enough to even hit the right numbers, it's really not working as well as it could for you. So that kind of ongoing management really works. So I mentioned earlier, you're going to have the fee you pay to Google plus the management fee. As you're assessing a company that's working with you, you need to assess them in these areas, and are they really going to help you maximize your pay-per-click to make their management fee worth it. I mentioned earlier all those different things that you can diagnose. Well, what about ongoing diagnosis? We've figured out what you need. We've put together a strategic plan, and now we want to move that plan forward. Well, we need to just continue the analyzation in each of these areas. So for your brand, for example, we need to make sure you're super consistent with your creative. We need to make sure we're running the analytics and adjusting your budget based on needs and so forth. Right? And so there's a process in your brand foundation of making sure that we're analyzing and moving things forward properly. But same thing internally. Continually ask those same 4 questions. Retrain your staff from time to time. Make sure you have tracking processes in place. Online. You can tell, and online is the easiest to track, frankly, because all the data is built in. You can just pull all that data. You can get that data automatically, look at that on a regular basis, and really determine, use that numbers game that I told you earlier in these different areas to determine what you need to do in order to get the most out of each of these areas. And then finally, your push campaign. Attaching dynamic call tracking numbers can help you automatically track results for that as well. You can pull that data and understand what's actually happening on those and again, maximize those to get the most out of those. Look at the demographics you send them to. See what type of demographic responds the best and really focus and narrow your audience over time. It's one of the main things you can do with a push campaign is not try to spread it to anyone, but try to get it to those people who are most likely to respond, and as many of those as you can. Okay? So that's the ongoing analytics. And the reason that's important, when we built our company, we recognized that in each of these areas, and pull those back up, in each of these areas, we have specialized team members who focus specifically on these areas. That allows us to do what's best in that area and understand what's best in each of those areas. And I want to show you a video of why that's important. Okay, so let me just play this and I'll tie it in a moment. This is a Formula One pit stop. This is actually the world record Formula One pit stop. All right, from stop to leaving was 1.8 seconds. They changed 4 tires, cleaned his mask, checked the car, made sure it was good to go, all in 1.8 seconds. It's because every single person on there had a very specific job. They were trained and they were extremely good at that one job. You can imagine if one guy tried to do all that, how long would that car be in that pit stop? And so we've structured our company, and by the time I get to this point in the presentation, I talk about all this diagnosis, all these different things that you have to do. I know from experience that many of you are thinking, okay, this all sounds good, but how do I do it? Well, the answer is you outsource it. You hire professionals who are trained to do those things. They can come in and focus very specifically on what needs to be done for your practice and get those things done. So it operates like a well-oiled machine. And we do that through the ongoing analytics. We're a marketing company, and it's a fusion between creative and analytics that allow marketing to work properly. As you're very creative in how you communicate and you're consistent in your brand and so forth, and you combine that with awesome tracking and analytics, that's how you generate the best results. Without great analytics and information, you can't make confident decisions moving forward. Okay, so let me show you, kind of wrap this up with how this works in real time. I mentioned these 4 strategy objectives. All of you need to master all of 4 of these things. However, your needs in each of these areas isn't like this image. They're not all equal, and what you need to do isn't the same. It's more like this or this, right? You need help, but it's not proportional. It's based on that diagnosis that allows us to come in and determine where do you need the most help? Where do you need to put your priorities? You got limited budgets. Where do you put those budgets? Maybe you need to really focus on your internal or your online, or maybe it's your brand that's really needs that help, or your push strategy. And it's also going to evolve over time. Maybe it starts one way and moves another. But the ability to diagnose and re-diagnose is ultimately what's going to deliver what you're really looking for, and that's profitable, predictable, and sustainable growth. Just think about that for a moment. If your growth was profitable, if your growth was predictable, and if your growth was sustainable, what could you do with your practice? Could you turn your practice into anything you wanted? Probably, right? And so that's the path to get there. All right, I'm going to end this with a couple of case studies. I want to show you the first one is Dr. Lindsay Spears. She's in Statesville, North Carolina. She bought her practice, I think 5 or 6 years ago, it'll say on here, but has been working with us from day one when she purchased her practice. Her current budget's about $42,000 a year. But when we started her, the practice she purchased was doing about $500,000 in growth. She'll talk about that in a video I'll play in a moment, but doing about $500,000 in growth. The doctor had never done any marketing previously, so when she started working with us, it was kind of a whole new thing for that particular practice. After the end of the first year, her production had increased from $500,000 to $610,000, which again is a lot of growth, especially for a practice that size. We were now bringing in 15 additional new patients a month. Year 2 went to $740,000. Patients jumped up to 26. Year 3, $970,000. Again, a lot of growth. She's been experiencing growth for quite a while, and to her credit, she's handled it amazingly. She was ready for it. That's what she wanted. And then 2018, $1.2 million, and 2019, $1.4 million. And one of the things that allowed this growth and her to handle it was that we also increased her per patient revenue along the way. So yeah, she kept seeing more patients, but because the per patient value was increasing each time, that really made the growth more manageable, more palatable. And here's Dr. Spears talking about that herself. And I want you to pay particular attention to, she talks about that calculator in here and how we work with her regularly to adjust her budget and understand her needs and so forth.
I'm Lindsay Spears, and I have owned Carolina Crossroads Dental Care for almost 5 years now. I started with a practice that was dwindling to nothing, maybe $500 in revenue in a year, to within 3.5, 4 years doing $1.4 million in a year. Ascent took me in under their wing and said, what do you want to happen? Do you want to grow, or are you content with this? And figured out where I wanted to take the company. It was a budgeting tool that kind of said, if you're wanting to grow, this is how much you spend. If you're wanting to stay right where you're at, this is how much. And I think it kind of gave me some perspective because I am a goal setter. And so I said, well, clearly I want to be growing, so I need to be at least spending this. And it helped me be more comfortable with what I was spending. The dollar sign is alarming at first, but it has totally paid off in the end. The return on investment has been huge and a really good investment for my practice. Now, when it comes time to renew marketing plans and see, all right, where are we going now? Every single time I feel like we take a look at our practice. We say, all right, how much is coming in? How much is going out? What can we do to alter this if we want to? I think with the practice that I run, being a solo practitioner, we're working 26 hours a week, and I'm very happy with that. I don't see myself leaving Ascent because Even in the sedentary time where we're just wanting to maintain what we're doing, marketing is so vital to the company. It's almost like if you didn't market, you would get wiped off the map these days.
Next case study is Dr. Chow. He's in the other side of the country in Salinas, California. He also has one location. His is a pretty big practice, but his budget's about $111,000. So his practice when we started with him was $2.6 million. Like I said, that's a pretty good size single practice. And he was already seeing 58 patients a month. So that sounds like a challenge that we were excited for. How do you continue to build on something that's already working pretty well? Well, in year 2, 2017, his production was $4.7 million. And he was now seeing 88 new patients a month. And the reason he came to us in the first place is because he'd kind of capped a little bit, and we were able to obviously help him bust through that and help that growth. By year 3, 2018, he had jumped up to 5.2 million. So more growth again, now 118 patients. And last year he did over $6 million in his one location, seeing 145 patients a month. And what's been great about the way we focused on this, we increased his per patient revenue from $1,083 to $1,484. That's a huge increase. It's one of the reasons his numbers went so high up. And how did we do that? It was the type of services that we implemented in his practice. We focused very heavily on communicating sleep apnea and implants into his practice and making sure he was the go-to doctor in Salinas, California for that. All of his keywords, his online marketing, his direct mail, we're really heavy in that, and he'll talk about that in his video. But all of that really helped him. In fact, just in sleep apnea cases, he was doing less than one a month in 2018. We started the marketing in 2019, and he's now averaging over 20 a month in just sleep apnea cases. So that's been huge for him. So here's Dr. Chow.
I felt like if I hadn't spent the dollars on marketing, I would have still been in my little one doctor office, like a lot of my colleagues are, treating their patients. Yes, they don't have to spend as much money on marketing, but there's no growth. They don't see growth. And with the growth that I have seen with working with Ascent, I actually work less now. So I'm only treating patients, my general patients, 2.5 days a week. Because of my growth, I was able to hire 3 additional associate doctors. I was able to hire specialists so that I don't have to do everything myself, right? I can actually go and take a vacation. My office is still open and making money for me. I don't even have to be there. It's running on its own because I spent the time and money to market myself, to allow my office to grow so that it can be a well-oiled money machine and operate even when I'm not here. And I don't think a lot of my colleagues can say the same thing. And they're the ones that have not spent money on their marketing.
So hopefully that gives you some courage and confidence. I get that the numbers can be a little frightening sometimes when it comes to marketing, but at the same time, it's a proven process. The thing that Ascent has done, as opposed to most of the marketing solutions out there for dentists, is we've taken proven, correct marketing principles and processes that big ad agencies used, and we've simply built those processes to work for dentists. That's all we do is work for dentists. For 10 years, that's all we've done is work for dentists. We understand the industry, how to reach those patients, and how to build your practice. That's why we're a growth company, ultimately a marketing company second. And I thank you for your participation.